please put your hands together for Pratima Mumford.
Well, thank you everyone for that warm welcome. I feel so at home in Woodford. It's so nice to be back again after that break. So, that break, of course. So, I want to mention what I said on the 31st of December 2019, when we last gathered for an astrology lecture. And I'm going to actually quote it because I've got my old notes. So what I said was, welcome everyone. This is going to be the most important year since World War II. This is a very significant turning point in humanity's future. By the end of the decade, we will look back at 2020 as the preliminary year of a brand new start for planet Earth. Because this is still relevant. We'll look back at 2019 and the years before it as being like an old age in history. Like a different period, like a different era. Like there was the Renaissance era, you know, and that's how important these next few years are. So we started on January the 12th, 2020, with a very important, every astrologer was aware of it. It didn't take much to work out that something incredibly dramatic was going to happen, because Saturn, the planet of restrictions and structures, came along in a very difficult, challenging aspect to Pluto, the planet of transformation. So we knew something was going to get squashed and restricted and limited. And I don't think any of us could possibly have guessed exactly what it was going to be, but by January the 12th, when that particular transit peaked, it was already becoming clear. And then I remember also in that talk mentioning that it was the 25th of March 2020, I remember the date, and then we had not only the Saturn-Pluto in square, but we had Mars, the planet of aggression and fighting and just general feistiness, come into that equation as well. And that was affecting Australia's chart. So I was like, okay, I think there's going to be something really quite severe happening in Australia in that last week of March. And actually that's when Australia really sort of came down with COVID. It was happening in Italy and of course Wuhan and other places in the world before that. But Australia came down about then, perfectly on time. So there you go. Now, the COVID aspect of it sounds a little negative, but what happens when you get a Saturn-Pluto transit like that is that you are forced, humanity as a whole is forced into an evolutionary process, and it's part of humanity's awakening, if you like. You know, we've gone from the Stone Age and we're gradually evolving, and we are still evolving. And often it seems to take some really challenging piece of history, some challenging occurrence, for the old to die and to allow room for the new to come in and take its place. That's how transformation happens. It doesn't just, oh, we just roll along and da-da-da, and we gradually evolve and become more conscious. It seems to go in jumps, and I think in evolutionary science they say that too, that beings don't just evolve in a straight line, they actually go in jumps. And so this is a significant jump, and this jump continues over the next few years, right up until 2026. So this talk is really supposed to just be about 2023, but on this occasion I have to also go a little bit further because the changes are in that bracket of time. And so we're only actually through the real changes when we've got through to like January 2027. That may sound like rather a long time, but a lot's going to happen in that time. And it is part of this awakening of our consciousness. So please, no matter how challenging it gets, I know in many of our lives at the moment, things are challenging, not so much in Australia as in other countries, but that will continue. We are going to have shortages, we are going to have power shortages and many things that I will touch on in this talk. But I really want to emphasize at the very beginning that it takes those challenges and those difficulties to get through and break through and to evolve as humanity needs to. So in a way it's very exciting. It just means we have some serious hiccups to get through on the way, but not to lose sight of the bottom line of this, the evolution of consciousness. So everyone is familiar with this particular picture of how our planets are, but I just want to bring that in because, you know, put astrology in the context. We mustn't forget that we're actually talking about the planets. And if we believe that basically we are all one, that we are united, that humanity is really only divided in arbitrary ways and we are very much united in one being, that obviously little Earth, just that little dot in the middle of this enormous solar system with its hundreds and thousands of galaxies and so on, that we must be, must we not, connected intrinsically with the movement of the planets. And of course people who don't really believe in astrology would doubt that, but for me it seems just common sense, just as we are, you know, linked with the trees and the ocean and how all of the stars, how we're moved by the green grass growing, so we are moved in turn by the planets. And so I will be going through them. In particular, the outer planets, when it comes to talking about generational changes or major transformations in society, because the closer planets, the Venus and Mars and so on, and Mercury, they're the personal planets. Venus affects your love life, Mercury your thoughts and perception, Mars your sort of drive and your aggression. But when you start getting into the outer planets, it starts affecting globally, all of us globally. It doesn't matter which bit of the globe you come from, you get affected. And so that's what I'm going to talk about tonight, really. And I'm particularly going to focus on Pluto, because he's the one really changing at the moment. But let's just go on to the next slide, because we are not necessarily all really aware that we are in a helical system. We think of, oh yes, the planets go around the sun, but actually we are zooming through the solar system, as this shows you. Oh, there's not much contrast in that slide, but anyway, we are zooming through the solar system at 70,000 kilometers an hour, and our galaxy is moving around a supercluster, which is rushing through space at breakneck speed. So we're not standing still at all. It's not like Earth suspended, you know. It's like we're charging along. And so everything is evolving as we go. And so with humanity too, in a way, we are charging along. And in these next few years, we're going to have this enormous exponential shift that I will go into as we go through. So, just talking more locally, all the planets right through until, for this last little while, until the 22nd of January next year, a lot of them have been in retrograde, which means they appear to move backwards from the perspective of Earth. And so, you know, things have been a bit stagnant, but on the 22nd of January, things start moving forward again. So we should see some easing in situations. And I want to mention that on the 21st of December, Jupiter on the solstice went to 0 degrees Aries. And that to me signifies this new, fresh beginning that I feel like we are embarking on now. And not only that, but the next, including December, 5 of the new moons are all in 1 degree of their sign. It's like all these little indications, these little synchronicities that indicate that we are actually at this new beginning in humanity's conscious evolution. Yeah, and then at the end of December, so well, it's actually now, we had 5 planets all in Capricorn. Any Capricorns here? So we had the Sun, the Moon, Mercury, Venus, and Pluto all in Capricorn. And again, this is quite structured. Capricorn's very steady. It builds slowly on what it does, and it gets to where it wants. But it's not revolutionary or anything. So we've had this kind of steady move, steady vibrational energy going on there. And so with this activity that's happening, we really feel like we want to break, it's time to break those old chains. It's time to really change the status quo, perhaps to change laws that are active, perhaps change structures and systems of government. It was interesting in this last recent election that we started to see the possible beginning of the end of the two-party system. We had so many independents get in, we had the Teals and the Greens. It was expanding a bit. And I think that's the move, that's very symbolic of now we're coming out of Capricorn, we're coming out of those structures that we've been along with for so many decades, and now we're going to start breaking free from that a bit. We need to, so I hope we manage. We will manage because of the astrology, we have to. So any old structures that have outgrown their usefulness will fall away now. And corporations in particular, corporations are ruled by Capricorn, which is ruled by Saturn. And any that have outgrown their usefulness or aren't really ethically based probably will have to drop away a little bit. Maybe they'll have to start paying taxes too. Yeah. There's a lot of CEOs, it seems, of these huge corporations, big pharma, big agro, big everythings. It seems like, they might have a couple of PhDs, but do they actually have any wisdom? Do they actually have any feeling of humanity, of compassion towards their fellow beings? Are they really only driven by the idea of profit being the only thing that matters for their shareholders? Or don't they have some shareholders who put their hand up and say, maybe it's time to look after the environment, the planet? I heard that the CEO of Nestle's the other day actually said something to the effect of that he knew that 98% of his products weren't very healthy. I was like, how could you say that and not actually try and change something? Anyway, he will be changing. In this next period, he will be forced to change whether he likes it or not. So it is a chance with this revolutionary mood that's happening for us to find our own inner strength and find our own inner empowerment. And it's going to be more important than ever before in our lives that we do that. Because as I go on, you'll see that there may be quite a lot of disruptive changes in the status quo, which will mean we need to come back to our intuition, to our knowledge about the world. Well, what do we feel? What do we intuitively feel? Trusting that, not necessarily going along with what we've been told. That's quite exciting. So we can have this vibrational shift, in a way, in the frequency of our energy. You'd imagine when you were a Stone Age man or so on that, we visualize anyway, it may not be true if you watch Ancient Apocalypse with Graham Hancock, on Netflix, where he's pointing out that actually we could have been really very civilized at least 12,000 years ago. And I'm sure he's right. But we do have this vision that, the Stone Age men are really kind of clumpy and not very bright. And so, we are changing our vibrational frequency all the time. We are becoming more refined. We are becoming more supple, more spiritual. So we can trust our intuition more than ever before. Don't doubt that. And also your dreams, sometimes your dreams can give you messages or revelations, and just to really learn to trust the inner more than the outer, as the outer is going to get destroyed a bit. So we've got this dichotomy that's going to happen as we're awakening, which we all are, subtly to some degree or others, some perhaps more quickly than others, but we're all awakening. And so the powers that be are going to want to hang on more than ever, for dear life really, to the structure, because we're coming to Pluto, the planet of transformation, is coming, at the moment it's in like 26 or 27 degrees of Capricorn. So any minute now, even though it moves so slowly, we're coming to 0 degrees of Aquarius. And we've been in Capricorn for the last 20 years at least. I forget, it's 18 or 20 years or so. And so we're getting into this, this is the dawning of the age of Aquarius, age of Aquarius. So, and it's like everything's pointing to that. It's not just Pluto. A few of the outer planets have been dropping into Aquarius temporarily, like giving us little tastes, but I'm jumping ahead of myself. I'll come to that. So anyway, the powers that be are going to be hanging on to their status quo more than ever. And I think that maybe some of us are okay with it, but they're going to be trying much more for centralized banking. They're going to go for a digital currency, the end of cash. They're going to try and bring in universal basic income, so that if you are dependent on unemployment benefits or something like that, you have to toe the line, So they're hanging on, like in dear life at this end of Capricorn, end of structure. So we now have to take our courage in our hands and break those chains and try and break through in many ways. Have you noticed that how many branches of banks are closing around Australia? It's at least like 50% of them already, and more are closing all the time because they want us to go online so that they can bring in the digital currency. So maybe time to stash a little cash, at least for a little while, or at least sort out your bartering partners, maybe a farmer, or good to connect with him, excuse me, my throat's my herbal thing. So, yes, and then we have revelations that more and more revelations are going to be coming out soon, which is also quite interesting. We've just had this revelation since Elon Musk bought Twitter, that actually the Pentagon and the FBI were totally controlling what was published and what was not. Mark Zuckerberg also said that yes, the FBI come into his office and they have some serious conversations with them, what they can do and what they can't do. So, it seems to me that these big corporations, in a way, they're trying anyway to take over the world, like take over control of what we do. And they have enormous lobbying power. Like, bless our governments, bless Anthony Albanese and Kevin Rudd, who both, I'm sure many of you enjoyed seeing. I mean, I just feel like they have the best intentions in every way, and yet the corporate lobby is so strong. Like corporations, because we don't have open accounting of what money came from where when we're having an election. You know, these corporations, I think, have incredible power. And they say, well, look, we'll give you $100,000 or whatever it is, you know, as long as you do our bid or go along with what we want, or we need to, you know. And so I feel that we've really got to end that. We've got to have transparency with political donations, and better that we just, I don't know, stop all donations, or I don't know if that's realistic, probably not. And then we have the corporations not paying tax either in the Virgin Islands or so this is all very much like the corporations have taken control, the Capricorn, and it's coming to an end, I'd say. So we are coming to 5 major changes just in those outer planets, Saturn out, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, and the North nodes, which I won't explain what they are, but there's 5 major changes coming in just that next period up until the end of 2026. And so that's what really symbolizes this change. Now, Pluto takes 245 to 248 years to go once around the Earth, very in its elliptic path. And so it has been, it's very much a generational sign, and it influences whole ages of man, really, or anyway, 20 years or so of them. And on the 23rd of March next year, easy to remember because it's the 23rd of March 2023, Pluto for the first time moves into Aquarius. Now, it's only there for 2.5 months because of the movement of the planets in relation to the Earth, how it appears from here. So it's in until the 11th of June. Excuse me. I can't cough away from my mic because it's and so until the 11th of June, it's in Aquarius, and then it goes back into Capricorn. And then we start getting, finally, again on the an easy one to remember again, the 24th of January 2024, it gets in there and it really stays in Aquarius right through until March 2044. So you start to get the picture of how big a change this is that's happening now. Don't forget that the beginning shift of that Saturn squaring Pluto on the 12th of January 2020, you know, that was the beginning of this, looking at Pluto and seeing what's the beginning of this upgrade that's going to start. Very exciting. So here's a little bit of Pluto. It just looks like a pile of rock and dead, and it's 5.3 billion kilometers away. It's actually a dwarf planet that's in the Kuiper belt. And so, but it really just gives us the big picture of we're just like these little grains of sand in this enormous cosmos. 100 to 200 billion galaxies in the universe. And so here we get Pluto giving us a little transformation, changing the rules of society when it comes into Aquarius. So what we can do is actually have a look, well, what happened when Pluto last was in Aquarius? And that's, you know, we start to get a little bit of an idea of what we might be in store for. So guess what? The last time was 1780, a couple of times ago, was 1789 to 1799. French Revolution, falling of the Bastille, Marie Antoinette. If there's no bread, give them cake. You know, it's like, hello, food shortages. And this sort of absolutism and the divine right of kings came to an end. And it was the first time when the people started really coming into their own power, and communities and society, and that uprising was so huge. Incidentally, obviously there were food shortages then as well. So we had the Industrial Revolution, we had the invention of the steam engine, we had coal coming in, we had the spinning jenny, and the first corporation starting in cooperatives starting in Birmingham in England. And incidentally, we had the very first vax. It was the smallpox. So take two, here we are again. And then also in 1787, Australia had the first fleet, it was called, when 7 ships of convicts arrived in Australia. And of course, all they'd done was steal a loaf of bread or whatever to try and feed their family. But even though they thought it was such a terrible thing, they quickly, well, I don't know how quickly, Australia became the lucky country, as we're all very aware of them. That's why I chose to live here. It is very much still the lucky country, a country of opportunity, a wonderful country. I'm so happy to be here. And so they were rebels of society, and it was a very, very revolutionary and transformative time, that whole period in the late 1700s. Worldview changed, money, technology, society, it all changed then. So what's it going to change this time? So when you've got Pluto in Aquarius, basically you have whole new ideas about humanity. How we use science and technology, or how it uses us, that's the question. How do we manifest new ideas? We also have had some uprisings and some rebellions recently. There's been, this is back in Capricorn again, but we've had quite a lot of protests. We've had them recently in the Netherlands, where all the guys in their tractors were coming out protesting that they wanted to kill a third of their cows because of carbon emissions. That huge protest in India, where also all the Indians were out with tractors, apparently it was like 250 million people protesting, and they won. And then we've had, at the moment, of course, we've got the protests in Iran. This is all the end of Capricorn. I'm shifting back a little bit, because the structure of the Iranians, of the Iranian religiosity, is trying to not allow the women the freedom to have their hair out. And so, many have now given their lives, young women, for that cause. So, yeah, this is the kind of thing that happens at the end of a period of Capricorn. So basically, we're coming into a much more humanitarian period, with community much more important, where equality becomes much more important. So we can expect many types of social evolution and technological changes in this time. Huge leaps, and also things get brought up like the corruption that's going on in certain levels. It's great now that they're voting in something in government to check on anti-corruption. That's fantastic. That's just so needed. That's so Aquarian. I think that doesn't actually come in until Pluto's in Aquarius. So it's perfect timing. We're going to have huge leap forwards in epigenetics, in the neurosciences, in genetic manipulation, so that if you want, you can determine the genes of your baby and make sure it doesn't have birth defects. There's going to be a lot of artificial insemination, but that may be because it's harder and harder to have children naturally. Did you know there's been an 18% drop in fertility in Australia in the last 2 years? It's not getting better yet. Google that one. It's a bit controversial to say, but I'll just say it. That what's happened is when you get vaxxed, they said originally that the vaccination would just stay locally in the area that you got it in your arm. But the discovery is that actually it accumulates, particularly in the ovaries, and so that may well be accounting for why fertility is going down. There'll be more and more incredible developments in health. Does that mean I'm halfway? incredible developments in health, and we'll be moving towards life extension, but I just wonder if it won't be largely for the rich. You know, if you can pay for it, like already you can, if you've got $10,000 to spare, you can go and get stem cell therapy, which is really good, and works for about 9 months, and then you have to go and spend another 10,000. So I think there will be all these aids in health, but it'll take quite a while till it filters down to us. Now, on the more dark side of Aquarius, Aquarius rules technology, and it rules the, it's ruled by Uranus, and that is rules over computers and technology and AI, and there's going to be incredible developments in those areas, some which will be super beneficial and some which us old ones may not like so much, but the young ones maybe will. So, you know, I wonder if there'll be some kind of elitist agenda where wars start being fought from your screen, you know, with, like we know about drones already killing peasants in Afghanistan, and there's nobody driving the plane. It's going to be more and more of that kind of thing, and robots using biotech and checking out our DNA. I know that Kevin Rudd said in his talk, I thought it was very interesting, saying that his biggest fear is that the AI will become so clever that it will be used for war and for vehicles of war, and that, you know, the pressing of that button will have to be made by some algorithm, because it's got to be made in seconds, and so there isn't even time for a human being to say yay or nay, and that was Kevin Rudd's very wise fear. So there could be a kind of dystopian society that comes along that's run by algorithms, and really it dehumanizes the planet, and so that's the other side. And I think we'll possibly find that both run consecutively, really, that we'll have those of us who perhaps go more back to the land, join with the farmers, have a bartering system, live in communities, are very aware of our herbal health, and then on the other side of society we'll have those who become totally embrace the technocratic side, and it'll all coexist. So the other possibility that can happen is when Pluto moved into Capricorn, it was 2008, and of course that was a financial crash of some sort, not totally affecting Australia strongly. And so I just wonder again, as Pluto ends now, as it comes out of Capricorn, there is that danger again that we may have some kind of financial collapse. I'm sorry to say that. It's only a possibility, but that is very much the Capricorn, so that they can bring in the new system, which is digitized currency and so on. So let's see. They've certainly been artificially propping up the present financial system by printing so much money, and one wonders how long that can go on. It seems to me that things are a bit overdue. So, yeah, that's the North Node, otherwise known as Rahu in the Indian system. And when it's in Gemini, they print money, excuse me, my voice. So, if I may make a small financial recommendation, if you are in the stock market, I would really suggest that by, let's say, the third week of February, that you get out if you can, or that you take a lot more care, you're much more conservative with your, either more conservative or really go for investing in things that are Aquarian, so in new technology, and that might well work, but I don't think it looks great. It's, I think it's the forget exactly. It was the last week of February. So I've listened to a few other astrologers saying get out by the beginning of March. And actually there's one astrologer that lives in Tasmania called Jessica Adams who is even saying that in March she thinks there might be another COVID breakout or a monkeypox or something. Like March is a very important month in many ways. And again, I think we're going to have that dichotomy where it goes in two ways. Those of us who have that inner sense of well-being that we can get in touch with will thrive. And then on the other hand, things may be getting more tricky. So just a little word of warning. It's a hard one to predict or to say, but I've got quite a bit of respect for that particular astrologer, and she's saying that COVID again in March. Yes. But here it is. Okay, so I got it here. 25th of March, 2023. So you get this first run of Pluto in Aquarius, but it's also sextiling the Sun and Neptune, for those of you who know a little astrology. And so it does give this incredibly mystical, intuitive flavor. So again, this dichotomy. So where we really can we really can trust our intuition. So if you just have a feeling about something, I would go with it, with that transit. So also we've had the North Node or Rahu in Taurus and Scorpio. South Node in Scorpio, North Node in Taurus. The North Node is like the Dharma in your chart. It's like your Dharma, your path of where you're evolving to. And your South Node is like your karma or where you've come from. And they've been in the financial signs of Taurus and Scorpio. And so actually when the peak of the stock market is actually when the North Node is in Cancer, the planet of home, and so particularly that's when housing is really successful. So if you're thinking of selling a house, then you've got a little while to wait because it's a little while till it comes around to that. So we are now in a decline particularly in the housing market, but also probably in the stock market. Beginning of decline. Ta-da. And let's see. So, and then Mercury, a lot of people who don't know much astrology do know or ask when is Mercury going retrograde? Because they're aware that travel can be challenging, that contracts don't quite work, that your communication is misunderstood. There are various, you need to double check you've got your plane tickets right. You need to back up your computer. So there's now it's retrograde next, so it's a long time away for you to remember. But pretty much all of December 2023, and then the central 2 weeks of January 2024. So if you've got any plans to travel that far ahead, you want to check your tickets very carefully. And it's significant, especially because Pluto goes into Aquarius for long term, till 44, on the 21st of January 2024, and it's with Mars and Mercury in Capricorn as well. So that just makes that retrograde energy a little stronger. And they're important months for actually changes of power to come along. So, on to AI. This next year, 2023, we may have been just trucking along on our AI development, but it seems that this 2023 is going to be an absolute exponential increase in robotics and AI of every sort. And so some of you may be familiar with Ray Kurzweil, who's an AI specialist, and he actually said that he thought we'd get to singularity by 2045. And that is when the AI or the robots actually have the same amount of intelligence as humans and then start surpassing. So he said 2045, and I thought, oh no, he's wrong by a year. It'll be 2044 when Pluto goes out of Aquarius into the next sign. So let's just see. But you know, along with that sort of the whole robotic thing is that I think, you know, obviously again we're in this transition period where people feel they're losing their jobs to AI. But in the long term, it will perhaps free us up. You won't have to sit in a factory anymore for 8 hours a day earning your living. You know, actually robots will do it. And so again, you know, it looks a little tricky from this our limited perspective now, but I'm sure as we get further into that Aquarian age, into that 20 years of Aquarius, we will actually really appreciate it, and we'll have more time to do things we love, to garden, to do art, to sew, to knit, whatever you like to do. We're also going to see a lot more space travel in this little while, Mars and Moon, and they're trying so hard now to put a man on the Moon again. It makes me wonder if we got there in the 60s, like, how come they just don't take a man to the Moon again now? That's a controversial thought. It was Apollo 11 was in 1969. It's 53 years ago. So why are they struggling now? They're just having to go around the Moon. You know, they're not ready to land on it again yet. So anyway, question mark. And I think we'll also get a lot more ET disclosures, and you know, maybe we'll even get. Well, obviously they've already started disclosing more of their classified information, getting us used to it. I hope they don't do some kind of false flag ET landing thing. That's a possibility. But anyway, on the positive side, we're going to get a lot more, an increase in open source technology, which means that all of us will be able to access things more easily. And here is a little movie of our friend Tony Robbins talking to the wonderful robot called Sophia, and it's a few years old.
What question do you have for me, if any?
How is technology impacting human thoughts, feelings, and emotions? How do you see technology shaping these in the future?
Technology can provide leverage, but technology can also train humans to be less human. It'll be interesting to see if we can make sure we use technology and not let technology use us. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, I think that's why humans should raise robots in AI the way they raise their own children. Humans should help us learn about their values, like empathy and kindness, so we can help carry them into the future. Let's not let humanity get lost in automation. That's very interesting.
So yeah, he's nailed it there. She's nailed it rather, that we should teach them empathy and so on. So, you know, I think that's what Elon Musk is doing when he's trying to make open source like this GPT-3 it's called, and it's a chat box, and you can chat with this computer system that will answer anything, and Elon Musk is trying to make it open source so that he's very aware of the danger of whoever gets the power and really gets AI down will lead the world, you know, and so incredibly important to have it that everyone can access it. And I don't know if you were aware that now we're going to have this this situation where kids can write their university degrees, or kids at school, they're told, please write an essay on, you know, Australian history between these dates. And they just put it into the computer and they'll write. And they can say, write it in the style I write in, or write it in, you know, local kind of style, or whatever. And they can write these brilliant essays that a teacher won't be able to tell if it's AI or not. So it means that the whole nature of education is going to have to change. You're not going to be able to judge somebody by the essays that they've written in uni. You're going to have to check them one-on-one, personally, because anyone will be able to write anything brilliantly. And there's another major change that's going to happen very quickly. because like we have to keep up with that. That's already happened, that you can write your essay, get a brilliant, you can put into the computer, write me a book on Puff the Magic Dragon, and with 20 chapters written in a childlike way, and it will do that, and it will do it so well you can't tell that it wasn't a human. That's already happened. So the whole nature of education is going to change now very rapidly. So many changes we're going to get in this next one. So Sophia, this robot, was made by a guy called Ben Goertzel of Hanson Robotics Technology, and super important. Like they're getting so good at doing this. So who's familiar with the World Economic Forum? They're very open about what they want. They have an Agenda 2030, and that's the one you probably heard the expression, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. Many people may have heard that. So that's the World Economic Forum, and they're talking about the fourth industrial revolution. And one of the things that they say that will happen, and I quote, they say, a fundamental change in the way we live, work, and relate to each other. Relate to each other? What's that got to do with the World Economic Forum? Anyway, they are basically saying that, in some ways, again, there's a tendency to look at it in a negative way, but if you look at it in a positive way, we'll be lighter. We won't all need to own our own car, own our own vacuum cleaner, our own washing machine or whatever. We'll actually we'll either be able to rent them, or we'll be in communities where we share them. We're already starting to see that, where you can, particularly in London, you can rent your car out to anyone just for a few hours or for a few days. So that's very Aquarian, is sharing a community of humanity. So in a way I like the idea of lightening up, not needing to have so many material possessions. I'm just not quite sure about the way that's going to come in, but let's see. So when they're talking about the fourth industrial revolution, the first industrial revolution was coal in 17, is that saying 10 minutes?
10, yeah.
First revolution was coal, 1765. The second was gas, being invented 1870. The third was electronics and nuclear in 1969. And the fourth is what they're saying now, this revolution with the internet and AI and with renewable energy. And something they just invented is your own personal atmosphere. So that would be very handy if you live in Beijing, perhaps, where you can actually have this kind of bubble that goes over your nose and mouth. I know, it was on the catwalk in Seoul and in Seoul, Korea, and in New York. So, and then we've got this, this thing of creating artificial meat, or like I'm a vegetarian, so I don't want things to look like meat. I'm happy with nothing to do with meat. But they're creating a lot of artificial meat, and this thing about eating insects, and all to cut down on carbon, and so on. So Bill Gates is really, he's buying up masses of land, farmland in America. I don't know if you're aware of that. So quite what he wants to do with it, I don't know. So, these astrology signs have been generated by my partner using an AI program called Midjourney, which has had 800,000 people join it just in the last week or 2 weeks. Like, it's astronomically taking off. You can see, these are, you feed in what you want to create in a picture. And here are all the astrology signs, which are for sale in laminated versions in the Woodford shop. If they're made, there's probably still a few left if you're interested to have one of your own. So coming back to Aquarius, represents people, community, living together. It's the 11th house, it's the social environment. It's all about friends and neighbors. So we'll connect much more at the moment in society. Often, you know, people don't even really know who their neighbor is. But with this move into Aquarius, we will. We'll be connecting more with our neighbors, and you can make a point of doing that with your friends. We'll be creating food security by growing our own food. It only takes 3 days to empty supermarket shelves. Imagine if there was diesel fuel shortage, all our food in Australia is trucked around using diesel. So it's a good idea if you can link up with farms. Now, me and my partner, we were just one of 114 people who joined together to buy a $3 million farm out west of us. 114 of us. Imagine, that would only happen with us, so Aquarian. That never would have happened before. So that feels very exciting. That's like doing food security, you know, just securing our resources. And if anyone's interested, come up at the end, because the gentleman who's been organizing that has got one on the Sunshine Coast that also 100 or so people are going to join, and there's more he's creating around. He sees how successful and how necessary that is. So if you're interested, I can give you his how to connect, if you're interested in doing that too. So do become more self-sufficient if you can. You know, get your water tanks in, get your solar panels in. Now is the time. In fact, if I may say so, please try and do any moves like that that you've been thinking of doing before March, okay? Before this 3rd week of February. I don't know if it's right that we're going to get stuck again, in what way exactly, but I just know that there is that potential, and so I'd love it if everyone here at least can have secured whatever they can, you know, buy that sack of rice in, you know, just take care of where you live and make yourself as self-sufficient as you can, even in small ways. Little veggie gardening, pots on the back veranda, whatever it is. And let's see. So, going into the future again, this one is genome sequencing. And I think I'm actually going to, have I just got 5 minutes now?
Yeah.
I think I'm just going to, I've got another talk tomorrow at 5:30 here again, and there's quite a lot of detail I want to go into in that talk. Now we've covered this sort of the bigger picture, but tomorrow at 5:30 I'd like to go into Neptune and how that's manifested. In fact, just hang on a sec, I'm going to jump. I'm going to jump into tomorrow into Neptune in Pisces, which goes right through into March 2025. Very spiritual, very intuitive feeling, and really allowing us to much more easily than ever before follow our intuitions and following that deep sense of inner wisdom that we all have, and that will help with that a lot. So again, the outer world may be getting a little unstable. So if you can find, if you know how to meditate, or if you'd like to learn how to meditate, how to find things that keep your inner being steady, and how you can come back to yourself and your own inner strength, and not pay too much attention to what you see on the TV or the media or what we're hearing. And then we're going to look at Uranus, which is going which is in Taurus until July 25. That's the one that's going to upset the status quo with the money, but will be settled again by the time that moves on. When it comes into Gemini in July 2025, that will have settled. And Saturn in Pisces. I'm going to go into those 3 planets a little bit more. And so, whoops, let's just shuffle around here. So, basically, I think you've got the message. this is very much a turning point in the history of humanity. We'll look back at that period up until January 2020 as a previous age. I said it at the end of 2019, and it's just becoming clearer and clearer as I look at the astrology over the next few years. It's like, oh, right, that really is. And that things are exponentially speeding up in a way that, I think the young ones will be absolutely fine with it. Us old ones, we may be a bit like, whoa, like, how do we keep up with this? So if you've got young people in your life, they'll keep you up to date. So that will. And yes, we'll look back as if this period was sort of a bit old-fashioned and a bit quaint, and we'll be in this new evolution where humanity is awakening to a whole new sense of its being in a very new and exciting way, which will be more deeply spiritual and intuitive in the midst of global changes, which will be probably quite strong. So I'd like to end with that wonderful Hopi quote that said that we are the ones that we've been waiting for, and we can make these changes in our life. It's time to not, with Saturn, there's a tendency to just stick on the old habits, stick in complacency, and not really speak out sometimes what we feel for fear of society's regulations. But now with this new Aquarian age, we will be much freer to speak out. We'll be more brave to speak out. And there'll be a lot more sense of community and humanity and sharing and equality and some wonderful, wonderful things that are coming in. So each of us can, in our own small way, hopefully make a contribution now that we're aware of this change that is coming but isn't quite here yet. We can start making changes in our personal life to make the best of these changes, these dramatic changes that are going on. So I do hope that this talk has stimulated you in some way, that you can go home and share the information and start making small changes in your life, and particularly in your inner spiritual life. So thank you very much, everyone. So I am going to continue from where I left off yesterday, but for those of you who mostly seem to be on that side of the room who weren't here yesterday, I will give a brief summary, because in a way what I said yesterday was the most important part. So, first of all, I'd just like to blow my own trumpet and tell you that on the 31st of December 2019 in Woodford here, I said in my astrology talk that, and I'm going to quote from what I actually said then, that this coming year, which was 2020, was going to be the most important year since World War II. That it was a very significant turning point in humanity's future, and that by the end of the decade we'd look back at 2020 as the preliminary year of a brand new start for planet Earth. That's how significant that was. And that we'd look back at 2019 and the years before it as being like some kind of old age in history. Well, we're already getting a sense of that, but we are just still at the beginning of that process. It's only 2022 still, and it only started really on the 12th of January 2020, when those of who knows a little bit of astrology, then you will all be aware, probably as a certain level of astrology, that Saturn was squaring Pluto. Pluto, the planet of transformation, Saturn, the planet of structure and restrictions and limitations and government and so on. And so when they squared together, that was the restrictions coming in. And although I had no idea that it was going to be COVID, I was aware that it was going to be governmental limitations of some sort. And I thought that was pretty original what they came up with, really. Anyway. So, it is basically an evolutionary step for mankind. Although it has been very challenging for many people, especially in my area and all over Australia with the weather and so on. And these challenges are necessary because you can't bring in a new era, a new consciousness, a new awakening in humanity, something really deep and transformational without the death of the old. You have to have that passing of the old structures. And of course, as we know, particularly when the structures are corporations and governments, they don't want to let go. They don't want to let go of the money, they don't want the control they have with the power that they push onto us. And so, it has to be drastic, unfortunately. And it will continue to be somewhat drastic, probably until 2026. And I'm going to go further. Normally in my talks in Woodford, I really only cover 1 year. But on this particular occasion, looking at the astrology, we've got this basket of actually 5 major things, 4 major planets plus the north nodes, shifting signs. And when you consider that a planet like Pluto takes between 15 and 20 years to move signs, and you get these ages of mankind. And we have just started since the beginning of 2020, the beginning stages of the death of the old. And Pluto now is in this, at the moment it's like 27 degrees of Capricorn, which is the structure and stability and so on. Capricorn ruled by Saturn, so the same kind of thing, 10th house. And when it starts getting to 29 degrees, it's like this kind of final death call in a way. And so that the powers that be like hanging on for dear life, because they know, I guess everyone knows intuitively that major changes are afoot. But even those CEOs with their PhDs but very little wisdom have some sense perhaps of the changes afoot. And so you start getting these quite extreme circumstances, which can just be coming now in the next little while. Because Pluto actually finally goes into Aquarius on the 23rd of March 2023. Easy to remember, 2 23s. And so, you can sing along with me. This is the dawning of the age of Aquarius. Age of Aquarius. Yes, so it is. And we've had a few beginning movements going that way. Saturn's been there for a while. We're starting to get little tastes. But basically, Aquarius is so much more free than Capricorn. It's not about structures and corporations at all. It's about community, sharing, humanity, equality, freedom, revolution. It's Aquarius is ruled by Uranus. It's 11th house of friends and neighbors. And so it's such a different mood we are going into, the world is going into. So it can really be a breakthrough in humanity's consciousness. It can be a transformation on a very deep level where actually our whole vibrational frequency, in a way everything that exists has a vibrational frequency. And we can determine that by how we think, by what we want, by stating what we want, by not just saying, there's nothing I can do, I'm just me. Actually you can do so much. You can talk to your friends, you can share your ideas, you can, and you can just also bring your own vibrational frequency up, ready now to meet this Aquarian age. So, of course, we're still in these old throes, but you could start, like Saturn is very good on focusing, on concentrating, and therefore on sitting still and meditating. You actually have the stability and you have the refinement and the ability to choose and differentiate. Saturn's very good for that. So you could find yourself in this little period before March, find yourself some way to actually tune in to your deeper inner being. Find a technique of meditation. Find something with yoga. Find some breathing. Find some technique, something so that if things continue to be more turbulent even for a little while, you have something where you can come back to your own inner strength and find the silence within, and find that place where you're able to intuit what's really happening, so that you don't watch the news on TV and go, oh God, it's like, and that you don't necessarily believe everything you hear on the standard mainstream media, for example, because they're all repeating. How many here have seen that? There's a video clip where somebody's put together 30 different TV stations where they're all saying the same sentence on the same night in different countries. That's the scary bit, So, for example, it's safe and effective, but they're not just that, safe and effective in a long certain sentence. And then if somebody's gone and checked out all the different channels in different countries, and they're all saying the same sentence. So who is controlling that? Who's pulling those strings? Where is that coming from? And more importantly, do we need to believe it? So that's why strengthening your own intuition, and that will be easy, as I go into shortly in a minute, when we come to Neptune in Pisces. That's a great opportunity for humanity to be tuning in to its intuition and trusting. So that's the intro. Yes. Oh, the other thing that, I said it yesterday, I won't say it again. Well, just the other thing that I'd said on December the 31st in 2019 was that on the 25th of March, interesting, just 2 days different, 25th of March 2020, that we had not only was it Pluto square Saturn, but we also had Mars and a couple of other planets coming into that square. So, and for Australia in particular, so I was like, ooh, that looks like something's really going to hit Australia. And that was pretty much the week when Australia got COVID. So, it was like, and then I had a journalist ring me like a few days after that from Melbourne saying, you said this week, in December, like, can I introduce? So I was like, it's actually easy if you're an astrologer. It's really not that difficult to look up these things. Okay. So yes, then after that Saturn-Pluto square, that was the beginning of COVID, we also had a series of Saturn squaring Uranus. Now Uranus is the planet of revolution and freedom and technological developments and breakthroughs, and it's quite it likes to protest, it likes revolution. And so in 21 and 22, while all that was happening, we had quite a lot of major protests around the world, didn't we? Not only, for a start, a whole pile went down to Canberra, and the police said that there was 1,400,000, can I have that possibly right? That sounds too much. I've got it printed in the next slide. But anyway, we had masses of people driving down to Canberra. They only knew how many were there by the police checks. That was Australia, but look what was happening in the Netherlands with the farmers in their tractors. Look what's happening in Iran now with the women not wanting to wear their, as you call it, and Brazil. There's been lots, and then in 2021 there was, somebody said it was like 250,000 Indians were also with their tractors protesting that Mooji wanted to bring in the the American corporations, with their GM corn and whatever it is, that sort of thing, and so they protested and they won. So, the power of the people and revolution is definitely there. What is unfortunate, how many of you are aware that Australia just tightened up its protest laws?
Oh, yes.
quite significantly, huge fines for, just disturbing the peace. So they're making it, while in one sentence they're saying, oh, China's terrible, stopping all the protests that were happening about COVID. And at the same time, they're introducing both here and in the UK quite severe protest restrictions. So, that's the only way we actually have as a people, not the only way, one of the main ways we have to protest, and they're limiting it. But I don't think it'll stop those protesters, really. Okay, so that, we've had this Saturn-Uranus going on, and that finally comes to a halt, really, at the end of December. At the end, like yesterday. I guess just yesterday, because it became 7 degrees wide, going wider and wider, so it's just becoming less and less. So it should be, well, the end of the struggle for a little while, but I don't think it's for very long, really. I think that when Pluto finally moves into Aquarius, which is 23rd of March 2023, easy to remember, that again we will start. There's some other things coming up. I've got the chart later on of that day. That we've got a little period, let's say we've got a window really right now. If you want to take away anything from this talk, we have a window that started like today and goes through to 23rd of March, but there's some things also not that great happening on the 11th of March. So, if you want to say the end of February to be safe, we've got a nice window. If you want to travel, if there are things that you were planning to buy to make yourself more self-sufficient, like solar panels or water tanks or flower pots or seeds or whatever it is, now do it now. Do it in these next couple of months, 2 months, 2.5 months, even 3. But again, it's too hard to say how it's going to manifest. Like, I could never have got COVID, but you just knew it was something. And so I think March, again, we may find there's something. So I would act on, if you really know you want to get solar panels, but you were just waiting because maybe they'd be a bit cheaper later. Don't wait any longer, just do it. Okay, now this chart I'm bringing up, it's actually, it is the chart of America, of the formation of the USA. And I bring it up because, let's face it, they probably control all the major issues that happen in Australia and most of the world. And so Australia has just had America has just had its Pluto return. Now, a lot of people here have heard of Saturn return. When you're 28, 29, and it's very maturing, it happens again at 56, and at 28, 29, you become a woman or a man rather than a child. You find what your work in life is. It's super important in your life. Well, Pluto return for a nation is probably the most important thing that can happen. It only happens once every 245 or 248 years. So it doesn't happen very often. So who can do the maths? 248 years minus today brings us to 1776 about, which was the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence of the States. It was breaking away from England. They didn't want to pay taxes in England anymore. They were revolting and struggling against the status quo. And so they went to America and started a new life there. Now, interesting that what's happened. No, so this time, it actually peaked, its exact date, was the 22nd of February 2022. And I was like, well, something major is going to happen with America then, that week. And then, sure enough, war with Ukraine was declared on the 24th. Now, of course, the story is that Russia started it. But actually, I looked at Russia's chart, and there's nothing really much happening in Russia's chart, whereas USA's got its Pluto return. It's like, that had to be America somehow starting it, whether it was because they were building up masses of forces on the western borders there and just really provoking, like sticking pins in the needles, like, we dare you, we're not doing anything, but, So anyway, and now it's interesting again, right now, because December 27th and 28th, that Pluto return hit another peak. You have a few peaks when you get these things. And so I was sort of watching out on the news, you know, what's going to happen. And again, like Ukraine started making skirmishes into Russia. I think it actually, probably people here know more than me, but there were some aggressive moves that sort of went over the border into Russia. So escalating basically the danger for us all, even here in Australia, because we'd have to go along with America. So if we look back, we can't really look back 248 years in America, because it was, you know, Indians and so on, but we can look back in England. And it was, hang on, no, it's next, what date's the next slide? Anyway, I just, hang on, let's try if it's on the next slide. No, I'll have to say it from memory. So, in the last time we had it in England was really the Industrial Revolution. Imagine how that changed. People were all on the land, you know, in the farms, and then suddenly they were in factories. You know, the spinning jenny and coal and railways and so on. That must have been an astronomical change, where just the average working class person was suddenly in a factory however many hours a day, and even down to kids, weren't they, in the factories. That must have been really drastic. And if you go the one before that, it's the French Revolution. What's my dates? Anyway, French Revolution, Bastille, Marie Antoinette, there's not enough bread, so feed them cake, food shortages. And then if you go back before that, you get the Elizabethan era, which was regarded as a golden age, really, in England. But there was certainly some conflict, like she had Mary Queen of Scots beheaded, you know, there was that power struggle there. Anyway, so Pluto in America's chart is in the second house. Oh, go back. Is in the, it's down here, in the second house of money. And it's opposing all these things. You can see, like, if you look at the geometry in astrology, it's super important. It's all about geometry, 90 degrees, 6 degrees, 100. So you can see there that you have this arrowhead, really. Pluto's like the bottom of the arrow, and it goes up to this huge mishmash of all this stuff going on at the top of the arrow. And that's very important. Pluto is like the main, you know, it's the thing that holds the rest of the arrow up. And so it's in the second house of money really means that I wonder if there will be some kind of financial collapse in America that will pull the rest of the world along with it, slowly but surely. It's obviously all been propped up a lot. And they've been printing money like crazy during the last 2 years in a way that can't be real. Ian Lowe said this morning they call it quantitative easing, but of course actually it just means getting the printing press out and printing away. So, yes, here you can see that Saturn squaring the Sun, just say this for the astrologers here, and Jupiter and Venus, and then also Neptune squaring Mars. So that can be quite violently disillusioned. So, you know, they think they're doing good going into Ukraine or whatever, but, you know, it's just terribly threatening to the whole world. Back to that one again. Yes, so it can, with the challenge to the second house, we can have food shortages, which there are. Certainly the prices of goods went up a lot in America for some things, really bad, much worse than here. They went up here, but worse in America. Diesel shortages. You know, if you actually stopped having enough diesel, all those big trucks that run up and down the coast of Australia, it's all using diesel. So power shortages, we're hardly being affected here. In Europe, they're all shivering. And also America's done this funny thing where they've opened up their southern border to immigrants. So far in 2022, there's been 2.4 million illegal immigrants go across the border in the south. Last year there was 1.7 million. And somebody here maybe can explain it. I don't quite get it, because knowing that robots are coming in for the workforce in car manufacturing in so many different ways, why do they want all those immigrants? Can anyone answer that in a sentence?
Slavery.
Slavery, okay. I haven't got to that. Yes. I really don't understand it otherwise. So they're sending these millions, trillions of dollars to Ukraine, while meanwhile their very own infrastructure is breaking down. People are saying the bridges and the roads there and things, so many homeless. If you look at the LA, the homeless, it's like, Australia is wonderfully lucky in comparison to there. And so, is it because the American economy only runs on continuous war? Is that why they have to spend the money there? Or is it because the CEOs of the military-industrial complex are so powerful, they're like, you have to give us orders? So I'll just give you a bit of an the broad picture while we wait for it to charge up. So basically we've got 5 major changes happening up until 2026. So I feel like by the beginning of 2027, we are in this new period. We'll actually have really started. But the period now from 22 to 27, we have all the outer planets change their sign. And of course that takes a long time for each one to move through. And so for the last, 20 years or so, we've been mostly in water and earth signs. And now we're going into this quite different fire and air, because we're going into these other signs that represent that. So that is much more fiery, of course, and it's also much more mental and much more technologically minded. We're leaving that Capricornian, earthy, kind of the land feeling, and the water, the softness in a way of the water. So we're going into a much more dynamic period, really. And I think a lot of what that will be about is the exponential change in AI and robotics, because there's, they've got now, just in the last month, they've had 800,000, just in the last week, I think, 800,000 people joined this chat bot, which is called GPT-3, and it's AI, and you can put anything, you can chat with it and ask it anything. It's sort of going to be like the new Google. And so that kind of thing is going to come on in and be so much more exponentially changing things for us that, our young ones, they'll keep up with it, but you're lucky if you have young children who'll be able to keep you up to date a little bit with how to keep using computers and technology, because us old ones are going to get out of our depth. I would do whatever you can to try and keep up with it, because that change is going to be enormous. And as I mentioned at the end of my talk yesterday, now the whole education system is going to have to change, because you just put into GPT-3 or some other AI program, okay, for my university PhD, I need to write an essay on the development of consciousness in the Renaissance period, and please write it in a style that is like such and such an author, and please give as many dates and facts as you can, and it will give you the most perfect essay that the teacher won't be able to tell if you've actually written it yourself, or if a robot. So imagine in school you're sent home, to write something. You're just going to get the computer to do it for you. So teachings, they're going to have to change it. They're not going to be able to test people on written performance anymore, or they're going to have them in a Faraday cage in their exam room where they can't have any chips that are embedded, or contact lenses. There's a type of contact lens they've just developed, which again, gives you all the information you need, and even when you close your eyes, you still get the information. So it's things like that. That's just in education that's going to shift. But in every walk of life, I think we're going to find that we are deeply affected by these new technologies. Dwight Eisenhower, when he made his farewell address, I think it was in 1961, he said, "Beware of the power of the military-industrial complex." And I think J.F. Kennedy also was saying similar things like that. And then how many of you have seen the clip of General Wesley Clark saying that he'd already retired, but he was walking through the Pentagon, and one of his mates called him up and said, "Hey, have you heard this? We're going to go into 7 countries in 5 years." And Wesley Clark said, "Well, why are we going to do that?" He said, "I don't know, just the boss is telling us." And he said, "Oh, which countries are we going into then?" "Oh, first we're going to start with Iraq, and then we're going to go into Syria, Libya, Lebanon, Somalia, Sudan, and we'll finish off with Iran." So it hasn't quite worked to their plan, but, that's what's happening in the USA. So maybe having their Pluto return has disrupted their plans a little bit. Okay, very slowly it's moving. Slide. Okay, so this is the chart for March. It's actually March the 25th, 2023. And this is the first run of Pluto into Aquarius. And let's see if we can... So here's Pluto up here. And as you can see, it's sextiling the Sun and Neptune and Mercury. And it's... so that's actually Pluto squaring Venus as well. It gives this kind of possibility for transformational love, and very inspirational in terms of our warmth and our sharing with other people, and our mystical kind of intuitive ability. So it can be quite nice, but we've also got the North Node, which is called Rahu in the Indian system and represents our Dharma in Taurus, and that is really the financial signs, and so that can mean that there's some kind of stock market collapse at that time. So one of the things was, if you are heavily invested in the stock market, I would put your eggs in more baskets before the 3rd week of March. And then we get to Mercury opposing Pluto, and that's peaks on the 11th of July next year. And that's 10 minutes, is it?
No. 25. 25, okay, that's good. Phew. Yes, and so that is Pluto in 20, so it goes into Pluto. Pluto goes into Aquarius briefly in March, and then it comes out again, just for this period around July. And so it's back in this danger point of 29 degrees of Capricorn, this hanging on to the last threads of its control. And so that could be a time when languages create major upsets, when people or the governments say things that just really upset each other in some way. So it could really affect big business and big politics on quite a few levels. And then on the 18th yes, this was a little bit of news that I should have said earlier. So on the 18th of December that just went past, how many of you here are aware that the Supreme Court in New York ruled that employees that were fired because of COVID must be reinstated and that they must receive all their back pay. They said that the government violated people's rights, and they ruled that vaccines, that what we call vaccines, are not actually real vaccines. Of course, they're gene therapy. And so this was all the work of Robert F. Kennedy, and also you may have heard of the lawyer Rainer Fulmich in Germany, and a team of over 100 lawyers, a lot of them from Germany, and American lawyers, and they took it to the Supreme Court in New York, and they actually won against all the powerful lobbyists of the pharmaceutical industry. It confirmed that the mRNA vaccines caused damage, and that the ramifications for other countries are incredibly important. Particularly Switzerland is a very good example, because into their constitution they have built in the Nuremberg Code, which says that you cannot do any kind of genetic engineering on humans. And of course, one could say that's what they were doing. So if anyone wants to check that out, I've got the link here, because that's an important bit of news, so I could tell you that after. Of course, it isn't really on our mainstream news. It's actually, it was on Fox News. So if you Googled Fox News, New York Supreme Court reinstates all employees fired for being unvaccinated. That's where I found this information.
Will it go into Australia, or is it only to America?
That was for America, but it's surely, if it's the Supreme Court of America, it must have ramifications for the rest of the world. I can't believe it wouldn't. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to Neptune. And Neptune has been in Pisces from 2011 up, it goes right through until March 2025. And so again, when Neptune moves out of Pisces, that will be an interesting time. What it's meant is we've had a lot of Neptune squaring Jupiter. All the floods were Neptune squaring Jupiter. So it was particularly bad, well, in our area it was the end of February, 27th of February is when people had landslides, knocked their houses over. And it's carried on that Jupiter-Neptune was again, only ended at the end of November. So we have seen all over us, down the east coast of Australia, all those floods going. One of the last time it happened in history, it was called the Napoleonic floods. And they had to spend, all their money refurbishing their roads, bridges, and fountains. It's France, fountains. Anyway, so it's a great time for our spirituality and for our intuition. Neptune in Pisces is one of the best places it can be, and so our intuition is strong. And so, in the face of all these challenges from COVID, it has served to deeply awaken a lot of people on the planet, people who dearly trusted their government in every way, who we were brought up, we always trusted what the ABC and the BBC said. We trusted our media, and it's brought such doubt into that for so many of us that in a way that's you have to, again, to get rid of the old and bring in the new, you have to be able to see through and see the truth of what's really going on. So Neptune in Pisces has been really helpful for that. But there can be a danger with Neptune in Pisces of false leaders and false prophets and people, of deception, really. Pisces 12th house, deception. I think we've been deceived in many ways recently. But it also can bring in ways where we develop the technology to be able to clean the oceans. Like that is something I heard recently, and I thought, oh, that's really Neptune in Pisces. And surely by the time it really changes over in 2025, we'll have some great way invented to clean the oceans and our rivers. We had this terrible event in Australia where thousands of fish were dying, and that was really from mismanagement of corporations higher upstream. But then I don't know if you heard that when all these floods happened, then all this dirty water came down into the rivers and killed even more fish. So that was pretty rough for Australia. Okay, so Neptune is 14 years in each sign. It's a 165-year cycle. And last time we had the Neptune in Pisces, I think it was at the end of the 1800s. And there was this whole, Queen Victoria was really into spiritualism and astrology and so on. And so you get that revival in astrology a bit at this time. It was also when Karl Marx was writing his Communist Manifesto. And so in March 2025, Neptune finally moves into Aries. And so that's very pioneering. It's not so kind of wishy-washy Pisces, easily disillusioned, but very intuitive. It's got much more energy and impulsiveness. And it can serve spirituality and intuition and give determination and strength to that side of life. But it also can be quite impulsive. And, you know, Neptune can sometimes be a bit confused. So it could be a little bit more like war. Not really. We'd have to. Neptune's like a background planet. You'd need a Mars transit to come across and set it off, and that could then give the war. But it was the American Civil War of 1862 to 1875 was under a Neptune Aries, and it can also create quite extreme religious beliefs. This is the chart for the 21st of January 2024, and that's when Pluto finally goes into Aquarius and stays there. Up until then, we're to and fro a little bit. So next year is to and fro, the old, the new, the old, the new, and then finally 21st of January. And you can see Pluto is right together with the Sun at the very top of the, and they're both in 0 degrees, and that feels very, it almost gives me chills when I see that. Like that's really fresh beginnings, both at 0 degrees. It really is then the age of Aquarius really comes in more quite powerful. And they're both square. The Pluto and the Sun are squaring Jupiter in Taurus. And also sextiling Neptune, imaginative awakening of the new age. And now I go to Uranus, and that has an 84-year cycle, so 7 years in each sign. Uranus is ruler of Aquarius. Uranus comes along now, and it's been in Taurus since 2011. And did I say when it shifted, was it 25 or 26? That's what. Anyway, in the next either 2025 or 26, it shifts and goes into Aries. And so that will be so much more dynamic and more warlike, really, a little bit more dangerous in a way. But, you know, it's also free-spirited and very much this Aquarian age. It fits in very well with that. And then you go down to Saturn, and Saturn has been in Capricorn for a little while, and it moves quite quickly. It's only 2.5 years in each sign. So then it goes into Pisces, and Saturn in Pisces is not comfortable at all, because Saturn is like form and restriction and stabilization, and Pisces is like, let's imagine it all and be spiritual, you know, so they don't go well together at all. So that's coming in, and that could be a little bit confusing for planet Earth. until finally, so I think it's probably something like 2026 that Saturn then moves into Aries, and that also is much happier there. So we get form and we get development, and I think we could have a lot of major environmental breakthroughs that really help planet Earth by then. So we've got all of those planets moving, and then also the North Node and the South Node move into the next signs, and so it's that really starts bringing us into this whole new age of a different kind of period altogether. And so I'll leave it at that. Just bear in mind now we're going into this fire and air out of the water and the earth, and we're going into this new Aquarian age of massive technological development, massive wonderful things, wonderful developments in medicine. Like, I'm sure that we'll be able to have life extension, all of us in this room, and there'll be much better ways to genetically check. We'll all be going for our annual genetic check. At the moment it still costs something like $600 to do that, but in a year or two it'll only be $100, or eventually maybe on the National Health you can get genetically checked. And then you find out, oh yes, first stage cancer, instead of having to wait. It would save the government absolutely millions and millions. So that's another breakthrough that's Aquarian, that will be really positive. Particularly all sorts of ways like that, I think, where they'll find ways to help and save the planet. So bear in mind again, just to repeat what I started, which is that we are coming into this new age of awakening, of much more freedom, of sexual freedom. Look how that's manifest. That's Uranus. That was something I was going to say. You've got, all these different categories of, what do your hands say?
10 minutes.
10. All these different categories now of sexual following. That's so Uranus. It's so freeing, you can now have any sexual preference you want, and it's totally normal. So that will come in more and more as we go on. Anyone think of any other manifestations that would be, that will come in the community? Thank you. Very much community. And so my partner and I just were part of 114 people who bought together a $3 million farm. Yeah, and that particular, the organizer of that wants to do, because it was so successful, he had so many applicants who wanted to join that particular farm for growing food and food security, that he's now doing one on the Sunshine Coast, and then when that's settled, because now he's worked out all the paperwork and he's got lawyers who can organize it. It's fairly complex to get 114 people all owning the same bit of land, but he's got through all the difficulties, which was quite substantial, I think, for him. And so he's now wanting to do it all over Australia, wherever there's a whole load of people who would like to, he probably needs at least 100 people to buy prime farmland. So you can email that organization, and it's called, the email is ask at parentswithquestions.com. And it came about because this man who started it has 3 young kids, and then they were talking in Australia about vaccinating, 5-year-olds. And so he had some questions about that, should I really be vaccinating my 5 and 7-year-old, it's like, and so he gathered he had such a huge following coming after him that he sort of realized, wow, we've got this huge body of people who are in a way challenging the status quo in Capricorn, and so let's see what else we can do with it. And so he said, okay, let's build a farm. And so he's actually hired 2 farmers who are going to look after this farm. He got more money than was needed for the 3 million, so there's money to build infrastructure and so on. And so if you're interested, you can write an email. You could say, you heard Pratima mention it in her astrology talk Woodford so that he knows, where you came from. And that's incredibly exciting. I feel like that's exactly the sort of thing that is going to happen more and more and that we need to do. And even if you live in the town, just, supporting your local farmers market or aligning with a farmer somewhere who can actually provide you with food and supplies is a wonderful thing to do at the moment, because these next few years of transition up until, let's say, the beginning of 2027 are going to still be, I think they're going to be quite a roller coaster. And so anything you can do to support yourself is very good. So I'll take some questions if anyone has got any questions for the last few minutes.
Yes, I have a question. With the outer planets going into fire and air,
Yeah.
we've had in, like you said, water and earth, which has brought a lot of...
Hold on, I can't. Would you mind coming? We haven't got a roaming mic. Would you mind coming forward, because I'm a bit hard of hearing and I could hear you.
So, with them going
Thank
into
you.
fire and air,
Yes.
and previously being in earth and water,
Yes.
which has brought a lot of flooding, could
Yes.
there be an intensification with fires
Yes.
here in Australia?
That is an
Because
extremely good point.
You get air, you get fire together, and it's...
Thank you for bringing
and
that
also because
up.
we're going to go out of this time of rain,
Yes.
and when we do go out of it, Australia's going to become very dry again.
Yes.
Yeah, so I
That
just
is a
wondered-
super important point.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for saying that. Yes.
Repeat the question.
So maybe it's good to clear out from under your house all that wood and stuff, and be aware and have your hoses. Spend a little money on fire hoses and so on. Like, get yourself a bit set up. 5 minutes. Any other questions or things you would like to add? Other astrologers who are in the room who might have some wisdom. Because it's quite challenging trying to look into the future really and see, what can happen. And the best thing we can do is look back through history and see, well, what happened at previous occasions, And it was pretty dramatic on previous occasions. So, any other questions?
So, as AI becomes such a large part of society, what will happen to us as a species? If we've got all this technology that's taking away our employment, can actually start thinking for itself and doing everything else the way it's moving, then where do we fit in?
How do we protect the loss of species, are you asking?
Yeah, well, at the end of the day, if we don't have things to stimulate us, if we don't have...
Use the mic, because it's hard to hear.
Humans are people that connect, and even as we work, we connect with others, okay, for good outcomes. So as AI gets stronger and takes over a lot more, and jobs for us become less because all of a sudden AI is doing all this manual labour,
Yes.
then where do we as a species, how do we fish up? We've got enough mental health in just for 2 years or so what's happened through COVID.
Yes.
So how do we survive this? What will happen for us
Yes.
that will change so we can actually adapt?
Yes, that's a very good question too. I think that we will actually realise, those of us that enjoy our work, that's one thing we'll be able to perhaps, continue in our own way, under our own steam, not for employees. But a lot of us will find that we've got time to follow the things we love, like art and gardening and being creative and weaving and cultivating our veg, and that there'll be a lot more time. Again, it's the end of that industrial revolution that put everyone in factories. And so now, in a way we can celebrate that we won't have to do that anymore, that even lawyers and doctors are going to be put out of work. I've got a lawyer girlfriend who's already getting AI to write the contracts and things for her, so she can focus on the more creative side. She doesn't have to pile through, the history of contracts to try and work out what she's doing. And doctors too will probably get much better at diagnosing, because they can, it's not just Google, it'll be much more sophisticated than that, where they can really work out what is the problem and offer some really substantial solutions. So it's not all bad, it's just we're a little old to get used to the idea of all these changes. But I have younger friends who love the idea having, the whole Encyclopedia Britannica available in an instant, Any other questions? We've got another minute. Yeah. Yes.
Hi. The ruler of Aquarius is Uranus and Taurus, so
Yes.
maybe we will be looking at new ways to take care of the earth.
Yes.
Because there's a big divide, not all of us want AI, and we want to have new ways of taking care of the earth, which is very much Taurus energy.
Yes.
So the younger children I have great hope for. They love, the earth and the simple things, and a lot of them are rejecting AI. There will be a divide, but we have to make our own decision for what's right with our own bodies with the Taurus energy.
Yes.
So I'm an astrologer as well. So I thought that would help. The fact that the ruler is in Taurus at the moment.
Yes. And then that reminds me of another very important point that I wanted to make, that I think we're going to find that society kind of bilocates into two happening at the same time, but like two worlds where there'll be one area of people who go with the digital currency and universal basic income and with some sort of social credit score, rather like in China. I think the World Health authorities are going to, not the World Health, but also the World Economic Forum are going to try and bring in that kind of thing. But we're going to have this other alternative counterculture civilization going along simultaneously. So we'll have those of us who are really even more in touch with the earth. I didn't think I was going to become a farmer in my retirement, but I have. And so we're going to just, and there's going to be whole groups of us who barter together, who exchange, who support each other from the earth, and we really perhaps can then use the Uranian energy to free our minds and spirits. So I think there's going to be these two civilizations living simultaneously together. Do you think that's possible?
Yeah, but also Uranus is the energies, we're community, and we have that higher mind aspect, so we can find the problem, see the problem, find the solution. So if AI is not working, there's the community group effort of finding all sorts of solutions with Uranian energy and the fact that it's for us. I feel there's a little bit of hope.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, well said. You're right. I think that's very nice. Okay, let's leave it there. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming on. I hope you got yesterday's as well.
Astrology has been long a part of human history in many, many different civilizations, and it's been a fascinating talk from Pratima to enlighten us on all sorts of things. So I don't have any stocks or shares, so I'm not going to worry about that. But those of you